The film industry, Marvel Studios, and the shared universe. Marvel Studios has changed the film industry forever with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and here's how other studios have tried to copy their success. This article has been written by Benjamin Ross. The film industry is in a much different place now than it was back in the 2000s. The most popular franchise was the Harry Potter series. And the genre of superhero films was only beginning to really gain in popularity. But in 2008, a film came out that would radically change the landscape of blockbusters and big budget studios, Marvel Studios' Iron Man. Iron Man premiered to both critical and commercial success. The critics of the review aggregate site, Rotten Tomatoes, claimed that it turbocharged the superhero genre with a deft intelligence and infectious sense of fun. Audiences everywhere loved the thrilling story of a superhero not yet explored in the film industry. Little did everyone know this film would kick off what would soon be the biggest and most successful franchise on the planet, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now 13 years later, Marvel Studios is absolutely dominating the film industry. Through what is dubbed the Infinity Saga, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, affectionately referred to as the MCU by fans and filmmakers alike, has gone through 3 different phases and released 23 films to mostly positive critical success. Their 2019 film, Avengers Endgame, was at one point the highest grossing film of all time. By November 2020, it was reported that the MCU was the single highest grossing film franchise in the world, earning a total worldwide box office revenue of $2.8 billion. That's a staggering amount of money.
Saul holds a special place among the Infinity Stones.
So with all of the success at the box office, and all of these other studios attempting to copy them, how did Marvel Studios get this big? A master storyteller with a vision for the future. The main reason, the linchpin holding it all together, is
we take notes and take ideas and learn from every screening we do. On those
Kevin
early Iron Man screenings,
Feige, the president of Marvel Studios and now the chief creative officer for all Marvel Media, had envisioned creating a shared universe between films where characters could come and go between films. This would involve introducing new characters and then having them cross over to another character's movie. With this idea, he planned to follow a familiar path to the superhero comic books of the 1960s, where heroes constantly jumped between different stories to team up.
He got the lightning.
Light the bastards up.
He began by laying the groundwork in Iron Man, then continuing it in Marvel's next properties, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America, the First Avenger. Finally, in 2012, he brought all the heroes from the previous films together in one big blockbuster battle in Marvel's The Avengers. The film was an immense success, grossing over $1 billion at the box office and being praised by critics and fans alike. Marvel Studios was now truly a cinema force to be reckoned with. It's a really interesting strategy for storytelling. If audiences like certain superheroes from different films, then why not have them team up? People already know these characters from previous films, so introduction and character setup becomes less of an issue when trying to fit an action-packed story into a 2 to 3 hour film. Merchandising becomes more profitable too. After all, who doesn't want to see Iron Man team up with Captain America and Hulk?
Send the rest.
And fight giant monsters together. The comics were smart enough to understand this, and Feige was wise to realize this vision and put it onto film. DC wants to stay in the game. Now with the release and success of the Avengers, other studios finally saw just how profitable these team-up movies could be and how much fans loved the idea of a shared universe between characters on film. Thus they decided to start their own. In 2011, DC Films decided to begin creating their own cinematic universe to compete with Marvel, their longtime rival in the comics department, based on the superheroes from DC Comics. They marketed this as the DC Extended Universe, or the DCEU for short.
Shall we?
They planned to introduce characters in their own separate films before putting them together into one giant film and calling them the Justice League. Some of their films, such as Wonder Woman and Shazam, have been received positively, while many others have had negative reactions from fans and critics alike. This all culminated in the expensive blockbuster Justice League. Despite a budget of $300 million, it only made about $658 million in the box office, a flop for a film of that magnitude. Now DC has decided to focus back on individual films rather than a shared universe like Marvel.
I'm bulletproof.
You're dead.
One studio that has failed to copy the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Universal's monstrous mistake. Another interesting and non-superhero example is Universal Studios' Dark Universe. Back in 2017, Universal Studios revealed their vision for the Dark Universe series of movies. These were films that involved the classic monsters of old, such as The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Frankenstein's monster, etc.
Has wandered through so many forms and so many ages.
However, just like the MCU, these films would be connected, sharing characters and details that would carry over through the different stories. The plan was to have famous actors starring as the titular monsters, the actors in question being Johnny Depp, Russell Crowe, Tom Cruise, Sofia Boutella, and Javier Bardem. The first film to kick off the franchise, The Mummy, starring Cruise as the titular character. The film ended up bombing at the box office and garnering negative reviews from fans and critics alike. Complaints of bad acting, terrible writing, and too much setting up for the Dark Universe, The Mummy was a failure in every aspect.
Wow, that was intense.
After the negative reception, Universal decided to cancel their whole shared universe, leaving the rest of their films to be shut down. Now they have a soft reboot planned, starting with The Invisible Man, which premiered in 2020 to much more positive reviews. Despite not reaching anywhere near the heights of the MCU, the future of the Dark Universe seems to be in a much brighter position than before. Film pacing and franchise setting. So what does this mean for the MCU? Why has Marvel been so successful while so many other studios haven't? The most important factor is star power. Casting well-known actors like Robert Downey Jr., Benedict Cumberbatch, and Scarlett Johansson creates a much easier box office draw than casting lesser-known actors. If people know the face, then they'll be more inclined to see it. Another factor that has been critical to Marvel's success is the idea of a good film versus a good franchise.
Yes, his think tank thinked it up.
A large factor into why both DC and Universal had failed to create the Marvel movie formula is that they were playing catch-up the entire time. They wanted to make their movies feel like crossovers from the start, in order to introduce other characters that would be important for future films down the line. In other words, they were more focused on creating a good franchise instead of making a good film. In Iron Man, Marvel never forced the idea of a shared universe down the audience's throat. The movie played out completely as if it was a standalone entry, with the only hint at a sequel being in a quick post-credits scene.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
This is how Feige planned most of their early films, making them great in their own right and only hinting at more very minimally. They were more focused on a good film over a good franchise. All of Feige and Marvel's moves had worked out beautifully, and the payoff has made the MCU the biggest and highest grossing film franchise of all time. Now being finished with their first 3 phases and wrapping up the Infinity Saga, they plan on releasing 10 more films in 2 years, an insane feat that only a studio as successful as Marvel could attempt to pull off. Only time will tell if another studio will ever be able to fully replicate the unparalleled success that Marvel Studios has had in the last 13 years. But so far, it seems as though the Marvel Cinematic Universe has no plans of slowing down anytime soon.
you.